Welcome to It Takes Heart. I'm Sam Miklos.
And I'm Kate Coomber.
We hope you enjoy these incredible stories of healthcare professionals making a difference in communities across Australia and beyond.
Through our conversations, we look to celebrate the spirit of community and care.
We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land who have long practiced and shared ancient methods of healing, providing care and support for their communities with wisdom passed down through generations.
Join us as we explore what it truly means to take heart.
Today we get to speak to remote and emergency nurse David Maxwell. David's been working with our team on and off since 2018 on a variety of rural and remote contract roles. In 2023, prostate cancer survivor David launched a local initiative in Cairns called Planet Prostate to help raise vital funds and awareness for the disease that impacts 1 in 5 men in their lifetime. Our team described David as a dedicated nurse who makes it his mission to fully understand the culture of every community that he supports, and he's always straight to the point. Welcome, David, to the It Takes Heart podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Thank you for coming, David. I guess I'd love to know... Go on, what was that?
I'd like to say first, I'd like to pay respect to the elders, past and present, on the land on which I am and where you are. I'm in Gimli, on your dingy country, and very happy to be home briefly.
I love that. Thank you. So home for you is Cairns at the minute.
Yeah,
and you've just
Cairns or Gimli,
and you've just come back. So tell us about where you've been in the last few months.
So at present, I'm working in Bamaga, which is in the Northern Peninsula area, which is basically the above, basically from above Mossman, sort of Hope Vale, all the way up to the tip of Australia on Queensland side. And I'm working at the moment for Queensland Health in their release pool in a primary healthcare centre,
And can you maybe paint a bit of a picture of what that's like? You see that it's very, very far north.
What's a day look like? You know, what's a day in the life of that role?
Oh, it's mostly standard sort of health checks, primary health care. We do have a hospital where one of the 2 facilities in the Northern Peninsula area that are lucky to have a hospital. Ours is the closest. It's literally, 2 minutes down the road drive. So in my present role, I don't see an awful lot of emergencies. Because we have a Queensland ambulance service that's attached to the hospital there and that sort of thing. But it's basically dealing with the day-to-day. I'm now moved into a role where I'm still learning about chronic disease. So I'm managing portfolios around sort of the renal, the cardiovascular, and the RHD, rheumatic heart disease, that is. In which I'm responsible, not solely, but as one of the nurses. I was there for the last 3 months. I was pretty much on my own. So doing sort of stepping across 2 roles and was the only nurse really responsible for giving the Bicillin injections in that facility, and then had to enlist the help of others, either the hospital or other nurses in different fields like the diabetes educator to help me when people didn't want to come and see me.
And what's Bamaga like for people who've never been there? Which is probably many.
It's like nowhere I've ever been. It's beautiful. But the NPA where I am consists of 5 communities. So Bamaga's the biggest, which I just thought was another lovely name. But since being there, I've learned is actually a person's name.
Oh, wow.
And it was created with permission of the local Aboriginal people when 76 years ago, the start of the sinking of Saibai basically started to sink. I mean, it probably didn't start 76 years ago, but at that time it was a critical point, and a group of people from Saibai left in canoes and came to Bamaga, and the gentleman who led that was named Bamaga, and it was then they gave him this part of land, and it was named after him And his grandson is still alive today. He's 78.
Wow.
I actually saw him just before I left, and he's the last survivor that I know of that came in that canoe 76 years ago.
How incredible. How incredible. I love that you you obviously have a real thirst for knowledge and really want to understand where you're working and understand everything you possibly can about the place, the people and the community. I think that that's something that the team have really commented on in your work that you do. I guess take us back to earlier in your career. I guess, did you always want to be a nurse? How did that start out? Where was home, and where you finally are today?
Home originally, as you might be able to tell, is England. I was born there. I came to Australia in 95. It's one of those sad but productive, because I'm still here, love stories that didn't quite pan out. So I didn't come here as a nurse. I had no intention of coming here as a nurse in 95.
Were you qualified as a nurse though?
I qualified as a nurse in Australia.
Right, okay.
So I actually studied between 2006 and 2011 in Lismore, New South Wales at Southern Cross Uni.
Right.
Yeah, so that came about by, I say, my previous career was hospitality events and that sort of stuff. And I was itching for a break, shall we say? All that. And it actually came about through a associate professor I was playing rugby with by the name of Professor John Stevens. And we got talking about, what else I could do. And he suggested nursing. And we were playing rugby together, and I actually broke my neck.
Wow.
And was flown up to Brisbane, and in those days they had the hard collars, and they put on the hard collar, and I was getting increasing pain down my right shoulder, and they padded it. They'd given me a lot of morphine, and I wasn't really working, and I was still awake, and they were quite surprised. And so when I got to Royal Brisbane, that was a Saturday afternoon. That happened Sunday morning. The consultant came and saw me and said, you've got a stable spiral fracture in and out. It was a C6 fracture, no deficit, and still had the hard collar on. And I said to him, I've got this pain and tingling down my right arm. And he said, it's probably, just the injury. And I said, okay. He said he'd wait and see if it dissipated. And I just had this feeling it was the collar. But everyone back then was really reluctant. It's changed the management of neck injuries now, but then it was put the collar on and don't touch it until we absolutely have to. And the male nurse, funny enough, came in, and I said, look, this collar's really giving me a problem. And he'd been there and heard that I had a stable fracture, so there was really no danger. He said, I'll go and see if I can find a soft collar. And so he went away and came back. And funnily enough, I don't know if I knew his name, to be honest, because he was in and out. And he went down, he found a soft collar, and I said, look, I'll take responsibility, but if it's stable, it should be fine. And he took off the hard collar and slipped this one on. And as soon as he did that, all the feeling came back to my arm, and it had been pressing on a nerve. And just after that, with the conversations I'd had with John Stevens, I thought, this is probably what I want to do, make that little bit of a difference. I'd been sort of on the other side of the schedule with plying people with alcohol or telling them not to behave in pubs and things like that. And I felt it was enjoyable. I did that on both sides of the planet, if you like, England and here, for about 10, 15 years. And then I just decided, it's time to do something different. And I felt something that would make a difference, really. So I ended up studying. I started in 2006, and my mum was ill then, so I got interrupted. I went over to be with her briefly, which extended it a year, and I came back. Then I decided to go to Norway as part of my course. So I went to Stavanger in Norway, and that when I went, I was told, "Don't worry, it'll all still line up and it'll be fine."
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it didn't when I came back, so that extended that by a year.
The world's longest degree.
And then I failed a couple of things, as you do when you're at uni and having fun.
Yeah.
So it ended up 5 years to fully complete the degree. And then I pretty much from then went rural. And back then in 2011, people were like, "Oh, don't go rural. It'll wreck your career. You want to go to a big hospital and get all the experience." But it was actually a really eye-opening experience, both, for my psyche, seeing parts of Australia that I never imagined. And my first point of call was Broken Hill and Wilcannia in far west New South Wales. And, it was amazing. The welcome was amazing. The learning was steep. But, it was really rewarding and learning how to interact differently. I quickly learned very early on, being in that sort of, you're 200 kilometers away from your nearest hospital. So we were also the ambulance as well. Yep. We had other people driving, but we were actually trained up to use the ambulance and do all that sort of thing. And Royal Flying Doctors used to fly in when they could, or we'd do 100-kilometer each way, mid-road transfers. Halfway we'd meet a Broken Hill ambulance, halfway down, transfer in a sleigh by, and do those sorts of things. So it was really, really turned your perspective on your head, if you like. Because
I was just going to say, because that's very early to go remote.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people.
Like, what prompted you to
actually do that?
Well, for me, it was, how far could I go? It's like, if originally, I guess, in my head, in an idyllic way, I was like, I could be a nurse. And then, when I get trained later on, I can go and help in disasters and do all this sort of thing. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to be a nurse, how far can I go with my placement? So I actually went in 2008, while I was still at uni, was the first placement in Broken Hill and Wilcannia. And I had a very supportive boss. So when I graduated in 2011, I asked, would they have me back? Applied, and they said yes. I went back. And so as a new grad in Wilcannia, I was very well supported. I wasn't left out on my own. Yes, there were ups and downs, but there was the support there. And because it was close by, you generally had, a doctor who stayed around back then. And you had senior nurses in the community you could call if something really went wrong. Yeah. But I was quite lucky there. We didn't get too much trauma and that sort of thing, despite the fact we were on a major road, highway. Wilcannia used to be known as the Paris of the West.
Oh, wow. I've not heard it referred to as the Paris of the West.
No.
It used to have paddle steamers going up and down all the way down the Darling. Yeah. And the old bridge at Wilcannia used to have a drawbridge sort of thing that lifted up.
Oh,
so
wow.
it would lift up in the middle and the paddle steamers would go along. That was when the water was flowing, which doesn't happen quite as regularly now. But
like Tower Bridge in London.
Yeah, sort of. But it was a straight sort of up like that in the middle.
I read, I think it's Sarah Donnelly's book, where she was a teacher who went to Wilcannia, and she talked a lot about the water when it flows and didn't.
Yeah.
And, the community and
very different.
Yeah.
When the water's flowing, it's a very different, vibrant community as to when the water's dried up. And there's some amazing pictures of people just walking in the riverbank with just puddles and stuff like that. It's very different aspect.
You've really landed on your feet in rural and remote, like straight up from the outset, which it often takes other people a good couple of years to get there. What would, I guess, in terms of, tell us about some of the communities that you've had the biggest impact on, and probably those really memorable ones that have really stayed with you.
I think pretty much all of them I've had. I've been to in different places. I've worked as a RAN. Wilcannia I was a registered nurse then, obviously not quite a RAN at sort of 2 years out. I then went from there to a place called Balranald, where it was like a doctor on call. and you had to always explain to people why you had a Victorian dialing code, even though you were still in New South Wales, and why you wanted to send people to Swan Hill and not somewhere else, you know. So that was quite funny. But I think the thing about it is each one's taught me something different. I say in Wilcannia, first up was the perspective of, you know, you come out of uni, you're all very keen. I was lucky enough, like I had good mentors, and I was able to relate with the community and learn very quickly that what you've learned and what you're capable of isn't the most important thing. Yes, you have to be safe. Yes, you have to have the skills, but it's actually more about understanding people and where they're coming from and what it is they want, rather than, you know, I think they always say that, you know, some of the nurses that go remote are like, we're going to save you, the saviors, or whatever, you know, and it really is just letting all that go. I mean, it's a practice. It's a practice ongoing, because we kind of go, oh, I've given you this information and this could help you and do this, but at the end of the day, you don't want to, or it's not your priority. You know, somebody's obligation to their family or the caring responsibilities is more important than their own health. And it's sometimes difficult to grasp that, but it's about trying to understand that and letting it go, and just every time's a fresh time. And now, sort of 11 years down the road or 12 years down the road, I just say to people, okay, I explain who I am, how long I'm there for. I think that's always important. You were saying about, you know, what could I say to other people? I think it's very important when you go into the communities to give people choice. Sometimes you don't have that if you're the only nurse. I've tended to stay away from the single nurse post, because I think for me, I wanted that support. I wanted that knowledge and ability to be mentored, whether it's by health workers or other nurses, so that you're not fatiguing, which is important. But it's that thing of, okay, here I am. I'm here. My name's David. I'm here. I'm a nurse. This is my history. So when I was in the NT, sorry, I'm jumping around.
No, I love it.
It was the 4 Fs, and I always forget one. So they taught us footy, family, friends, and fishing. There we go. I got it this time.
There you go. You got it in one hit.
So that's your point of contact. So where you start as a nurse is introducing yourself to that person, telling them where you're from. Yeah. Because you're on their country, and what your heritage is. This is my personal thing. I'm not saying that everybody should do this, but I found it works for me. And so they get a sense of where you're from. You tell them how long you're going to be in their community, and you give them that choice, because a lot of the time people don't want to see a stranger. You know, they don't want to go over that story over and over again necessarily. So if you give them that choice, and then they go, no, it's all right, I'll see you. Yeah. And that's a real privilege when you really know nothing in that sense of where you are, how the dynamic is, and the ins and outs of the protocols, or even that sort of thing. It's just trying to learn. The other thing now I've developed in saying is, you know, please, I'm here to learn. So I don't know your culture. I know little bits, but please educate me. Let me know if I say something wrong or ask you a question that may be deemed inappropriate, so that I can learn and better my practice. And a little thing about that is one thing that came out of that is, especially somewhere in the territories, it's not so much where I am now, but there are places where even when you've got a couple in, you can't ask them about providing a sample in front of their partner. Yeah, yeah. So I got told, luckily I was told that by a very lovely man, and he said, look, you can't say that. Yeah. So you literally just go and get the pot, put it in the brown bag. Everybody knows what it's for, and you hand it there and say, can you do that for me? Yeah. You don't actually talk about what it is, because in certain places that's not acceptable. Yeah. Yeah, so it's just things that rejigging and I guess self-reflection in those terms of what we think is day to day, which in all these different cultures, because there are many around this country.
That's what I was going to add.
just completely. You just wouldn't even think of it.
You can't assume, can you? You've got to kind of go in with an open mindset of almost, I know nothing, tell me everything. And we were talking earlier about that cultural awareness piece, and it's challenging. I think some people have talked about certain courses that you can do and some upskilling in that regard. But it really sounds like you need to lean into each and every community and actually ask questions and be open and authentic, so that you can really have the best impact you possibly can whilst there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, unfortunately, because of the system, we're going into places that are short of nurses, let's face it. We're filling a gap, a need, because people don't want to necessarily be there. But the key for me is to go in and try and tap into that local community, the local health workers, even the driver. It doesn't really matter to ask those questions. It's very strange to me in the territory. There's in certain places, when somebody dies, depending on their standing in the community, they shut the shop.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was like, what? The shop shut? No, so and so's passed, and we're shutting the shop, and the clinic's going to be shut. Or a lot of times now they'll allow the clinic to keep going, but all the Indigenous staff will go home as a sign of respect. So it's okay for the outsiders to keep working, but the Indigenous staff will go home in certain places. And it's just like, when you landed there and you don't really know something, you're like, I'll pop up to the shop and get something, and they go, no, it's shut. Or for other reasons, where things happen culturally and they close the shop. And it's like, okay, if you haven't got food, you just, I've got a big enough belly that I can manage for a day or two.
You can survive.
It is those sorts of things. And it's really, it's a privilege to be allowed into those communities. I think being mindful of the fact that we are guests, also, taking into account where places where I worked where overcrowding is rife, which we know in communities, and we step in and step off a plane, and you get the use of a car, and you get a 2-bedroom house to yourself, or a single bedroom unit. I was in a 3-bedroom house living next to people who had 20 people in a 2-bedroom house.
Wow.
In the territory. And so that, being conscious of that, and understanding that, the environs are challenging, but we're blessed. We really are blessed, and I hear a lot of people complaining about, it's not enough money, or the conditions of this, or the dogs are barking all night and this and that. Someone's partying down the road. And I get that, because, we do have to get up and we have to go to work. But what you have to understand is the rest of the people have to deal with this when we've gone.
When you're gone.
This isn't something that they've cooked up to upset us. This is the way the communities live, A lot of places, when it gets really hot, no one gets up in the day, and they get up at night, and they have to basically live their life back to front because it's too hot.
Yeah.
You've also been, you've been so involved in the communities you've worked in. And is it true that in one of the communities you were offered, was it a permanent role or a longer term role, and you actually went and spoke to the elders in the community to see if you had their blessing? Is that correct?
That is actually correct.
Tell us about that.
So that was in Nooka. You guys had sent me there as a RAN, and the possibility came up to have a full-time role. And we had, I can't remember how it came about, but there was I think it was just people said search about the art centre and look about something, it was an off-the-cuff comment. And they said, I'll go and look at this video about the art centre. And in that, there was a lady from Nooka who was, I better not say her name just in case she's no longer with us. But she was talking about the structure and the cultural structure. And she described, the proper way of doing things, and the fact that there's this sort of 3-tier system, if you like, of elders that you had to go and talk to. If you wanted to do something in the community, you needed to get these people's permissions. And at the time, I'd met some of those people, but didn't know I'd met them because I wasn't introduced to them. Anyway, so I did some research when this came up and the opportunity, I think when I was working with Janine to be there. And so now I knew these people. I went and asked, and I went and saw the different levels and said, look, there's a possibility I'm going to apply for a job here and want to stay. Is it okay? One of them I treated like the day before and didn't know who he was.
Who that was.
And the other people. And they was like, we're happy to have you in your community. And I said, I'll be applying, but I wanted to talk to you first. And generally when I go to places anyway, I try to seek out either the, local land council, if you like, or someone, an elder in the community, and introduce myself. Sometimes that's done for you, but generally, I think it's important to just go out and say hello, whether it's a council office, and say, I'm your new nurse. I might only be here for 2 weeks. They'll know you're there, but it's just making that difference and reaching out to them. I found really good, and the welcome was great. And I stayed, I think, ended up there 15 months in working there, and it was a hectic place. It's 5 hours drive from Catherine, I think.
Yeah, wow.
But it was enjoyable, and I tend to measure my contributions. I think leading back to that question about the impact is less about what I do, but how community relates to me. So I've been lucky enough that, say you work in the Territory, you go to Darwin or you go to Catherine. If you're working in, Mount Isa, I think another place you sent me, you go to the shop and stuff. It's how the people you've treated react to you when you're out on the street or when they see you in somewhere else. And for me, I always say to people, I have a saying that says, if they're not throwing stones at me, then I think I've done all right.
You've done your job.
I guess with that notion, are there places, and sometimes you go on contract when maybe it just isn't right and it's not the right fit?
Yeah, I think it is. There are, and it's about being aware. And I think part of that is that connection and talking to people about what it is they want. I think a lot of us, we've gone to university, we've spent all that time, we've got all this knowledge, and we know what's what, but really we don't in that respect. So I think I've been to places where certain say visiting specialists will get no one in their clinic. And certain other professionals will find it hard to get people in, for certain things.
Why is that? Why?
Well, it's about, like I say, it's about the connection. If you're approaching stuff from a point of view of, I've got the knowledge, you need to listen to me. It's not going to work. When I was leaving uni, to give an analogy of this story, after I left uni and had been to Wilcannia, and this was in my first year, which impacted this quite a lot, one of the lecturers who I didn't know had done a survey in the Indigenous College in Southern Cross in Lismore about the understanding of diabetics about their illness. Because there was this perception in the medical profession, they don't know, that we've got to chop off a toe, then we've got to chop off a foot, then we've got to chop off a leg. So they mustn't know, understand. And what he found in his research, that they understood very well, that they'd seen it all, they'd had relatives from doing that and all this sort of thing, but they were looking at what pleasures can I get out of life? And making choices like the rest of us, because let's face it, antibiotic resistance didn't start with the Indigenous community. I know, I'm guilty of that too. And then I feel better, I don't think I'll finish the course, or I left them at home and blah, blah, blah. So it was that understanding that people actually knew more about their illnesses probably than their own health professionals. But the way we talked to them about it made it seem that they didn't. And so once you start to actually listen to people and understand that for them, it's less about what you're telling them. Sometimes it's a health literacy thing, but sometimes it's I've got more important things to deal with. This isn't my priority, you know. And certainly, just recently, where I've seen that with a couple of people with coming home to pass away. You know, that is a major priority. Yeah. Everything centers around that and stops for that. And, you know, everything else, you know, I don't have an appointment. You know, I've got an appointment for my heart. No, I've got to cook a meal for my uncle who's 90. He's 90.
Yeah.
You know? And you go off and you see someone, they're like, no, I'm not coming to that appointment. You go, okay, that's all right. I'm not going to give you a hard time. Just let us know when you're ready and when you're back. And I think that's the hardest thing for us as health professionals, because even the ones like myself with the best intentions,
want to help.
Not that I always have the best intentions, shall I say, but you know, it's that. But I know this will help.
Yes,
I know this could make a difference. And it's like, yeah, but that's not the thing. What's going to make a difference for this person now is kind of saying, I'm here when you're ready to come back.
Yeah,
you know, or even giving little kids who've been brought in for their jab and have no choice about having the jab, letting them say, which arm do you want it in? And you get little kids go, what? You know, and they look at their parents and they, which arm? It's, you know, you're going to have the injection because mum says so.
Yeah.
But where do you want it? Left or right?
A little bit of control over the outcome too.
And it's those things. It's about giving people options when they have none, and that leads into what you're talking about with the male, female.
I was just going to say, you know, and we know that men's health, I guess, is you know, important to you. You came and spoke to the team last year, and we mentioned in the intro. You launched the initiative Planet Prostate. I guess I'd love to hear a little bit about that initiative and what you hope to achieve, but potentially also the impact that you can have being a male nurse in some of these communities. You talked earlier about the men's business, the women's business, and obviously having that different person there who can add to the community.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's a case of sometimes you've got to use the facilities you have. So let's face it, there's very few male RAMs. There's probably even fewer male midwives, but they do exist. You know, I listened to a great podcast from a guy who's in Arnhem Land somewhere, and you know, it took him 2 or 3 years, he says, but you know, he worked at it, and now they're kind of, no, we want him.
Yeah, you know? Yeah, I bet.
And you know, I've had instances where I've been, shall we say, caught off guard by the willingness to sort of show their injury or something without kind of warning.
Yeah,
you know, like, whoa, okay,
all right,
you could have sat down first and described something. You know,
hello, I'm David.
and, you know, it's that's surprising at times, but generally, I've found, to be honest, the best. I guess the best way of approaching it is again going back to that. Are you happy to see me? You know, there's been times where I've got, you know, obviously being an older man, I didn't always have the beard, so I could get away with looking a bit younger. Now they're going, oh, you're an older man now, and which is kind of good because they don't feel like I'm a lot younger than I am. So it's getting, you know, you get say a 25, 30-year-old woman in, and you say, are you happy to see me? And they go, yeah. And you go in and you start to do their obs, and you just notice that they're not connecting. They're feeling like, you know, the body language, not that I'm a great believer in body language of its own, but it is very important in communities. In fact, they you know, express that body language is more important than talking, in a lot of ways. And so you just go, you know, are you really happy to see me? You know, there's a lady down the hall, I can get her to see you. And I go, oh, no, it's right. And I go, yeah, I know it's right, but you have the choice. And then they might go, oh, okay, I'll see the lady. But in certain places, I've been told you can't do that. You know, you're the nurse. Just tell them you're the nurse.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the problem that happens with health is we're vulnerable, all of us. When we go in, we're looking to our health professional to provide answers, to provide support. But the dynamic is skewed. You're unwell or you're feeling off thing, you're vulnerable. If someone can say, like, you could have done this better, or, why didn't you take your tablets? It's like, what's gone before is gone. Okay, you didn't take your tablets. Okay, this is what we need to do with it. We need to explain to you maybe, if you'd finished the course, we wouldn't have this. We do this a lot with the SAWS and the bicillin. Because the choices for that treatment are either a bicillin injection or a course of syrup for kids. And so I try to say to the parents, are you sure they're going to take 5 or 7 days of syrup? If they're not, I know it's painful and I know it's traumatic for the child, but give them a bicillin because it's done, it's over with, it should do its job. And more importantly, it's quicker to protect against something like rheumatic heart. So it's those kind of choices and dealing with those sorts of things where the difference is made in increments. There's going to be people who may not like you for being there, but let's face it, as RANs and primary healthcare nurses, our job is to do our job so well that we're not needed. We're always going to be needed, but the primary healthcare principles is that all goes back eventually to community and becomes community controlled and organized and whatever. But that has its problems, and I've been places where people say, we're glad you're here because so-and-so won't talk to so-and-so, so if you're not here, then that person doesn't get treatment in extreme cases. But on the other hand, there's places where there are those cultural barriers, but people understand that if there's no one else, you've got to kind of deal with that. I will say, I won't do an ECG on you unless it's a life-threatening thing. It's not life-threatening, you just need a routine ECG, I'll get you a lady. But if you drop on the floor and you need advanced life support,
we're going to have to do it.
But it's then also how you do that. If there's somebody there, you can get them, literally speaking, to lift up their relative's breast, and you can put the dots on, and you can do all that without actually being too invasive. Make sure they're covered. You don't just rip things off, and it's just a different way where you'd see in a normal hospital, it's an emergency, we'll cut the clothes off and do that. You don't kind of do that. And I've had people say, you're not cutting this shirt off, it's my best shirt. You're like, okay, this is going to hurt because I've got to get it off. So it's those things that it's just vastly different.
So many stories. I think if other healthcare professionals were listening and really enjoying hearing the differences between different communities, but also just the different line of work that you can have, what sort of advice would you give to people who are considering, is that the line of work for them?
You have to be flexible, which doesn't always work, but you have to try. Open to change. It's, little things are different, like the way, even small things like going rural. It's kind of like going into a religious community in certain ways, and I'll make that clear in dress. We come and we're from beach suburbs and do this, and we're runners and this and that. We go in these tight little shorts and little vests, and we're running around, and it's like, you don't do that. People do, but they go, why is everyone staring at me? And you go, and this happened when I was going to Broken Hill. I had a friend, actually. We both went out to Broken Hill in different places, Wilcannia and Broken Hill. And I said to her, I've been out there before. You need to, when you go to the swimming pool, you need a rashie on, And she was like, oh, no. And she's a surfer chick. And we're like that. And we're still friends today. And she went to the pool without all that, and she came back. She said, everyone's staring at us. I said, I told you, you got to put a shirt on. You might have a bikini on, but you put a shirt on. If you haven't got a rashie, you put it on. Nowadays, 12, 15 years later, you go to Broken Hill Woolies and people are wandering around in bikinis now. But back then, in 2008, it was a bit different. I still find it weird because Broken Hill's miles from the sea. But anyway,
I was thinking, why are they in bikinis in Broken Hill?
It's the tourists though. They come through and it's hot.
Yeah.
And they go, I've got my bikini on. I'm going shopping. It's like, it's not Byron Bay. You can get away with it.
It totally isn't. David, can I ask a little bit more about Planet Prostate? That's for you to have launched that initiative yourself. Like, tell us about that. Like, what do you hope to achieve with that?
Well, it's going to be a slow uphill climb. I know that. So the idea of Planet Prostate was to raise money and awareness. I must say that I think even when I spoke to you guys, it became less about the money and more about the awareness. Prostate cancer is a widespread diagnosed cancer for men. It's also a double-edged sword because it's one of those cancers that people say you don't die from it in general, you die with it, which is true in a lot of cases, but there's those small amount of cases where it has a major effect. And obviously, like breast cancer, it's a family-wide effect. And the thing about that is the guidelines in general in the greater population are like, don't test because we only find 1 or 2 people. That's fine. But when you're in a rural area, 1 or 2 people is a big impact compared to like a city. So for me, going through it as a health professional, I found bewildering, challenging at times. And with someone who has that health literacy, I also began to realize that comparatively, again, not that it's a competition, but unfortunately, the resources that breast cancer has is way more than that of prostate cancer. And what surprised me was that the BRCA1 and 2 gene, which is a potential cause for breast cancer, is also a potential cause for some prostate cancers.
Wow.
And we do all this breast screening and we find people with breast cancer, and I couldn't seem to find any way that we were then saying, you need to talk to your brother or your son because you've had breast cancer, so that he gets checked earlier than the guidelines. Because there's a potential, and vice versa, that if someone's got prostate cancer like myself, then I need to talk to a sister if I had, or even my niece. So for me, my dad had it, and that's what he passed from. If I get it, I think I'm twice as likely to get it if I'm right with the figures. If I've had a close relative get it, because myself and my dad have got it, my brother is 3 times as likely to get it. But he's had a different type of cancer, so I'm actually the last in the family of 4 to get the cancers. But anyway, that's another story. That's
must have been all the hospitality days.
Yeah, I think it is. It is, and it's a lot of. To be honest, for me, I also believe in the sort of psychosocial of health as well. There's more to it than social, emotional, and psychosocial causes, and holding things in, resentments, all these sorts of things. I do read a bit of Louise Hay, if you're aware of who that is.
Yes, I am aware of her writing on the mirror, the affirmations and all of her things.
The affirmations and stuff. But, it's not about being a be-all and end-all, but it's about taking a multitude of things and picking what works for you out of little things. But coming back to Planet Prostate, it was that speaking to my cancer nurse, I think they said at the time there were maybe 12 or 14 prostate cancer nurses dotted around. And in Cairns, there's 2 nurses that job share, and they have possibly 300 clients in the far north Queensland.
Wow.
And so the idea of Planet Prostate was to raise awareness, get people talking, hopefully raise funds as well. It hit a bit of a snag because I got the blessing of the Prostate Cancer Foundation of Australia, and I was also working with a small charity here. But there's all these rules about doing raffles and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And as a small charity, you're unable to do a nationwide raffle because you have to have financial footprints in the states that you're doing it,
right?
Or at least be with like a Commonwealth Bank or a ANZ Bank. So these are all things that I learned. But the whole thing is about raising awareness and getting people talking about it in the same way that we talk about breast cancer, and eventually, hopefully, although it could take a while if I keep going, getting a sort of pink test thing going on.
Yeah.
You know. But my idea is I've been playing with ideas, and this year I haven't started yet, which I should have done. Coming up with do a dad for prostate, which is going to be hopefully donate $1.
Yeah.
So do a dad for prostate, and then the plan with the pink sort of test thing was eventually to make connections with both the NRL and the AFL because their seasons finish roughly at the same time. Not the final stuff where it's really important the people there, but generally the last game when they've had the Pride round, they've had the Indigenous round.
Yeah.
Nobody has a round at the bottom end.
Yeah, that's so true.
So it's like, you know, it's hopefully the bottom end for prostate. You know, and that would be the idea.
That's a good marketing tagline there, right there.
And then just to get people, because cost of living as well, you know, I've had this discussion with the Prostate Cancer Foundation and other charities. You know, we tend to sort of put up these things and you go on and you get a link and it's like, give $50 or less, you know. And so people go, oh, you know, because we're not paying our mortgages and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So my idea was to say, give $1 or $2 and to get 10,000 people giving $1 or $2 rather than 50 people giving $50.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And people won't miss that. So that's the idea that I'm trying to develop. And hopefully, if we can get those codes together and other codes, I did try and get in touch with the Wallabies actually because they had the Rugby World Cup in September, and I was trying desperately to make contacts with them because one of the stand commentators, Justin Harrison, is an alumni of my university.
Oh, there you go.
That didn't really work, but you know, it's you can't expect to do it all in the first year.
That's it. We'll have to think.
So
who do we know? Who can we connect?
I mean, it's just about connecting. But you see, it's also difficult because what I'm learning as well is a lot of charity fundraising is dependent on individuals. So they will give you a letter to say you can raise money for us, but I've got to be very clear that I don't work for them.
Yeah.
And also they have ambassadors, which I'd love to approach, but are kind of off limits.
Yeah, okay.
You know, and all that sort of thing. So, yeah.
So I guess today, David, when we talk about Cornerstone bringing $500 to a charity of choice today for your participation on the podcast, where is that money going today?
So my choice is the local charity that helps cancer survivors of all sorts.
Yeah.
It's called Couch Wellness, and it has a long history in Cairns. I believe it's on land that was donated by a family who campaigned long and hard and were instrumental in eventually getting a cancer centre that we now have in Cairns, the Liz Plummer Cancer Centre. They operate separately on a block of land not far from where I live, and they basically have services. So they've got, you know, physio, massage, all these sorts of different things. They've got what do you call them? My brain's gone. Sorry.
Yeah, that's right.
Therapists.
Yeah.
You know, psychologists. You can access. They run a little cafe. It's in a very lovely little courtyard area. You can hire the buildings to support the charity. You know, they do regular fundraising around Cairns, and because of the family links, have got a great sort of grassroots thing with various companies around Cairns that will do, have not tip jars, but have donation jars for 2 or 3 charities and local charities, and you put your bottle tops in or whatever, and now they count them up and give to that charity. So for me, they've been very helpful. They were very supportive with the Planet Prostate thing. And as a small charity in a big small town in far north Queensland, I think $500 would go a long way to them. So that's where I choose to send the $500 he's gratefully donating on my behalf.
Thank you so much, David. We have just so enjoyed our time with you. You know, you are such a genuine, respectful man. You know, the work that you do and just the effort that you put into your community, it just shines through so much. And, you know, at Cornerstone, we're so very grateful that we've been able to be affiliated with you over the years. And certainly I've always loved that you've always given us feedback and told us that we need to lift the game of what we're doing well. And I love that about you, because you're just always looking to leave where you've been a better place. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to share, rate and review. This allows us to reach more people and share more incredible stories. Click the follow or subscribe button to ensure you never miss an episode.